Side 8, Xone of Contention, by Piers Anthony. Continuing on page 249. "Don't look," Brianna said. Tristan smiled. "It does seem that this meets the technical situation of not changing the future." When they were alone, Gray reversed course and went back the way they had come, right back into Xanth. Robata oriented, and they entered just one day after their original departure. The invisible giant was waiting for them. He picked them up and brought them rapidly to the cave. "Why didn't the giant carry them from the cave when they were leaving Xanth?" Pia asked. "The giant might have remembered," Tristan said. Then Gray and Robata entered the cave. "Did anything change?" Gray asked. Pia exchanged a glance with Edsel. She had forgotten about that aspect toward the end. "Not that we know of," Edsel said. "You did a nice job of covering your historical tracks." "When my parents walked in, I thought we were lost," Gray admitted. "But then I realized that I was not overlapping myself, because I did not yet exist. I had merely been signaled for." "And when you got stoned, we thought you were lost," Pia said. "But Robata carried through." "I had to," Robata said. "I could not handle the return alone. Also, it was what a souled person would have done." Pewter's screen lighted. "Did you get the weather data?" "Yes," Robata said, "and so much more. I have learned to emulate a conscience." "For sure," Brianna agreed. Gray turned to Edsel and Pia. "I believe that completes your service for the good magician. You are now free to go." He turned to Computer. "And I believe it also completes my obligation to you, according to the terms of our agreement." "Agreed." "And you may now open the closed file and recover your personal portion of the adventure." The screen dissolved into a pleased swirl of color as Pewter did just that. "Hello," Ivy called from outside. "We're back. Are you?"
"Yes, dear,"
Gray called. "Oh," Pia said, suddenly remembering. "Were Demon Ted and Demonica here yesterday?" "Why, yes," Robata said. "We played together, but they departed before you arrived." "Did they have a magic locket?" "Yes, that was what we played with." "Where did they go?" "Demon Vord took them to the fantasy. They love that." "What is that?" Edsel asked. "It's a pond where folk can find their wildest dreams." "I hope they didn't stay there," Edsel said. "They should have been home by the end of the day," Tristan said. "One more thing," Pewter's screen printed. "Contact with the exchange couple has been lost again." "That's nervous business," Edsel said. "They could be in trouble." Pia agreed. "We had better wrap up our business in Xanth and try to make the exchange back." "I shall continue to monitor the ozone," Pewter printed. Pia bid farewell to Tristan and Robata, whom she had really come to like, and they left the cave. There was the duck-footed boat with Princess Ivy and the triplets. They rowed back toward the good magician's castle, telling the story. It was, of course, Gray's story, but Edsel and Pia were able to fill in many details and reassure Ivy that he had done nothing untoward during his adventure. "Except sleep with the Gorgon," Pia said mischievously. Ivy raised a brow. "Oh?" "Well, you have to understand," Edsel said. "She was 18 and lovely then." "And innocent," Brianna added. "To keep her warm," Justin said. Ivy laughed. "I'll ask her next time she's the designated wife." But Pia suspected that she did not find the joke as funny as the others did. They reached the castle and dropped Gray and Ivy and the triplets off. "Now we need to find those demon children," Pia said. "Probably best to start with their parents," Brianna said. "Nada should be able to round up Demonica any time." "Where can we find Nada?" "I believe she's visiting her home now," Justin said. "That would be Mount Edaman, north of the Gap Chasm." Paris set off. He knew the way there. Progress was swift, thanks to the duck-footed boat. Soon they were crossing the Gap Chasm, using the invisible bridge, the same one she had seen through Robata's eyes in the past, when she and Gray were guiding his parents and the Gorgon to the Xanth border. The gap was as awesome as before, descending a mile or so into gloom. They had crossed the chasm when the harpies carried them south, but it seemed more formidable now that they seemed to be floating close to its maw. Suppose there were a break in the bridge, a section out? Pia closed her eyes, feeling unpleasantly giddy. Soon they were back on solid land, to her relief, and forging along a new path. "Oh, we're coming to the library," Brianna said enthusiastically. "I love this place." "You like to read?" Edsel asked. "Not exactly." Pia looked at her. What did she mean? They came to a section where the tree trunks resembled the spines of books, complete with print. Two, close together, formed a gateway. In front of it was an armored knight on a steed galloping in circles. Para halted. "What's that?" Pia asked. "That's circulation," Brianna answered. "Hi, Q. Feeling smart today?" "Very well-rounded, thank you," the knight replied courteously. "Do you wish me to show you around?" "No, thank you," Brianna said. "We're going straight through, this time." "As you wish." The knight guided his armored mount to the side, and Para waddled on through the gate. Just inside was an ogre stamping his big hairy feet. They left little marks on the pile of cards beneath. "That's the gate stamper," Brianna said. "Hi, can I have a date?" "For sure, Paramore," the ogre responded with something like a smile. He tossed her a card with a date on it. If there had been any doubt before, now it was clear that Brianna had been here before. Then there was a solid man sitting at a desk shaped like a huge tome. "Hi, Dick," Brianna said. The man stared stolidly ahead, not deigning to answer. "That's Dictionary," Brianna explained. "He won't speak a word to anyone, though he knows every word in the book." She did not seem annoyed. After a moment, Pia got it. Shun. In Dick-shun-ary. A verbal pun. "Let's see. There's a map in here somewhere, if we can find it," Brianna said. Para wove along different paths, searching. They came to a glade with a pattern of grass and sand, like a miniature golf course. "At last." "At last what?" Pia asked. "We finally found the map." She indicated the pattern, and Pia realized that it was indeed a map, with the sand marking paths. "Atlas," Edsel murmured. "Atlas at last." Oh, Pia could have done without that. They followed a path to a number of warriors doing a dance of victory. "That's the Conquer dance," Brianna said. "Concordance," Edsel murmured. He had more of a mind for this nonsense. Beyond the dance was a dead tree. A feline snoozed in its bare branches. "Catalog," Edsel said. "Can't we just get on out of here?" Pia inquired, pained. "It does get rather wearing," Justin agreed. "Magic is the main thing that distinguishes Xanth, but surely its second attribute is puns." They passed a tree with dampish small fruit. "Due date," Brianna said happily. Then there was a dolorous researcher poring over a several-volume set. "Cyclopedia," Brianna said. "I do love her," Justin said. "Even here." Brianna faced him. "Shut up, or I'll use the card file on you." "Card file?" Pia asked, unable to stop herself. "It trims the edges of the king, queen, jack, and so on," the girl explained with a straight face. "And there are some book jackets." Pia looked. Sure enough, there were shivering books with warm jackets. They passed a moving picture of young women dancing and removing items of apparel. "Para," Brianna said severely, "I told you not to go by the film strip." "That's quite all right," Edsel said, watching avidly. The boat veered, taking them by a high building. "What's this doing here in the library forest?" Pia asked. "It's a story collection." "You walked into that one," Edsel said. They peered up to the 13th floor, where spirits flitted in and out of the windows. "Don't tell me, let me guess," Edsel said. "That's a ghost story." "Enough!" Pia cried. "Get me out of here." "She really means it," Edsel warned Brianna. "Yes, she's serious," the girl agreed. If Pia had had a pillow, she would have whammed them with it. Fortunately, the exit loomed. There was only one insubstantial plant barring their way. "Through that mist tree," Brianna told the boat. Etzel opened his mouth to say something smart, but caught Pia's dagger of a glance. "We found our way out because we had the index," Brianna said, patting the interior of the boat. Index. The female dog was still doing it. But now they were out of the library and back in normal magic jungle. "Do you know, I once met a lady who gave nothing but opposites," Justin remarked innocently. "Her name was Auntie Nim. I believe she would have felt at home at that library." "But we don't really need the library," Brianna said. "We can see the pay-per-view." She held up a roll of paper. Pia knew she was going to hate herself, but she had to ask. "Pay-per-view?" "You pay for each time you see it." "That does it," Pia screamed. She jumped out of the boat, landed off balance, and whirled into the soft side of a cow-like creature. The thing made a soft, sickly moo. I'm sorry," she said, recovering her balance. "I did not see you." The cow looked so sad that all her anger dissipated. The boat halted, and she climbed back in. "Music soothes the savage beast," Etzel murmured. Pia tried to summon back her rage, but was worn out. "Actually, it is the savage breast that is soothed," Justin said. "She's got 2 of those," Etzel agreed smugly. "And they are most elegant," an elephantine creature remarked, leaning over the boat to stare at her blouse. "Pay no attention to the sycophant," Brianna said. "It flatters everybody with equal insincerity." "We are approaching Mount Etamon," Justin said. Pia was relieved, until she saw the dragon circling the peak. In a moment the dragon spied them and swooped down. Brianna seemed unalarmed. She stood carefully in the boat. "Hi, Draco," she called. "It's us, Justin and Brianna, and friends, coming to see Nada Naga." The dragon waggled with wings and veered off. Pia was not entirely reassured. What would have happened if we had not been friends? "He'd have toasted us," Brianna said, shrugging. "But I wouldn't have let us come here if I hadn't known it was safe." "Draco is an honorable dragon," Justin said. "He has a very nice collection of gemstones in his nest. I believe he is the only dragon to possess some black barrels." Para ran up to a tunnel and into the mountain. Soon it opened into a lighted cave. A huge snake loomed, forming the head of a human being. "Who are you, and what is your business here?" "Brianna of the Black Wave, Justin Tree, Etzel and Pia of Mundania, and Para Boat," Brianna said. "We need to see Princess Nada Naga about her daughter, Demonica." The Naga guard rolled his eyes. "Has that demon child gotten into more mischief?" "Not exactly. She has something we need, a locket." "Wait here." The human face disappeared, and the serpent slithered through a hole in the wall. Soon 2 other snakes returned. The big one formed a lovely human head with a small golden crown. "Hello, Brianna," the princess said. "Hello, Nada," Brianna said. "Etzel and Pia are mundanes, here on an exchange program. They need to borrow the magic locket Ted and Monica found." The small snake formed into Demonica. "It got boring. We left it in the fantasy." Oh no, Pia thought. They were going to have to search for it. "Can you show us where?" "Sure, I think." Brianna hesitated. "Is it safe for mundanes in the fantasy?" "It is if they are careful," the princess said. "Why don't you take Monica along and bring her back here when you find it?" "Thank you," Brianna said. "Hop in, Monica." The child performed a huge hop and landed in Pia's lap. "Hi, Pia," she said cutely, and kissed her on the cheek. Pia hugged her. This sort of thing was getting easier with such cute children. "Hi, Monica. How did you get so sweet?" "I gave my sour to Ted, for today." The others laughed. The boat turned around and set off. Monica remained on Pia's lap. Pia loved it. There was just something about the child. Pia had never wanted to have children, but after meeting this one and Ivy's 3, she was changing her mind. "Now just what is this fantasy?" Edsel asked. "I mean, I know that wild dreams appear there, but what kind of dreams are they?" "All kinds," Brianna said uneasily. "The truth is, I don't much like the fantasy. But if that's where we have to go, then that's where we have to go." "Good dreams or bad dreams?" Pia asked. If Brianna didn't like that region, chances were that Pia wouldn't like it either. "All kinds," Justin said. "It is a place where actual dreams escape from the realm of the gourd. Normally they are disciplined, organized by the gourd crews and carried by the nightmares to sleepers who deserve them. But at the sea they are undisciplined and can do what they want. Even the good dreams may not be welcome when they have no outside controls." "Good dreams unwelcome?" Edsel asked. "I'd love to be swamped by good dreams." But both Justin and Brianna looked dubious. Only the child agreed. "Yes, fun." "I'd like some clarification," Pia said nervously. Xanth was a land where face values could be very literal, but still needed to be handled with caution. Why should a child enjoy something that adults were wary of? "It is somewhat awkward to explain," Justin said.
"We're here," Monica said. "Go straight ahead, Crackfoot."
Pia looked ahead. It seemed to be an ordinary lake, with brush around the edges, and reeds growing in patches. Para ran into it and started swimming. Brianna looked to the side. There on the bank was a cemetery memorial stone. She shuddered. "That's a dream?" Pia asked.
"For sure. That's serious."
"It's a gravestone." The girl nodded. Then Pia smelled a pun. Gravestone. Serious rock. "Are you pulling my leg?"
"Not this time, honest. That stone reminds me of my dead mom."
"Your mother's dead?"
"No, but I used to dream she was, and I knew because I saw that stone. It scares me to pieces."
Pia saw that the stone was moving along beside the boat, paralleling their progress. "Can you get rid of it?"
"I used to be able to wake up, but now it's out here in my waking state."
"There is a way," Justin said. "It is possible to make the dream spooks cancel each other out. What is necessary is to lead one into another, so that they collide. This requires some maneuvering, but is feasible." "What happens if one catches you first?" Edsel asked. "Dreams can't cancel people, because then there would be nothing to see them," Justin said. "They are mere phantasms."
"But they sure can scare you," Brianna said. "That's what they do. That's their magic. They make you feel whatever they want you to feel, and you can't escape it."
"So we have nothing to fear but fear itself," Edsel said. "Or other emotions," Justin agreed.
"I'm too young to be scared by grown-up things," Demonica said proudly.
Meanwhile, Pia was watching the gravestone. "That thing is moving closer."
"I know it," Brianna said tightly. "I'm afraid that if it catches me, my mother really will die."
She was not joking. Her face was distraught. "I believe I see another," Justin said, "but I don't recognize it." Pia looked. It was a tropical tree, seemingly growing out of the water. "It's just a palm tree," she said. "No threat to me." Edsel looked. "Oh no," he breathed. "It's mine." "What's its threat?" Pia asked. "It's a joke my brother Bentley played on me when we were kids. He told me about it, and I thought it was real. It's a napalm tree." "I don't believe I am conversant with that variety," Justin said. "That's because it didn't exist in Xanth until this moment," Edsel said. "It's my bad dream. It has barrel-like fruits that explode on contact, setting fire to anyone near." "Oh, a variety of pineapple tree." "Maybe so, but it terrifies me." Indeed, Pia had never seen Edsel so scared.
"Tree go bang,"
Monica said, intrigued. Pia saw that the tree was coming closer. It did have deadly-looking fruits. She remembered the description of napalm. It soaked its victims and burned their skin off and wouldn't stop. It was one of the most horrible weapons in existence. She didn't want to experience it even in a dream.
You said we can make them collide, Pia said. Let's do it.
Only their subjects can lead them.
But neither Brianna nor Etzel looked capable of doing much,
Pia pointed out. Yes, that is the inherent irony of the situation. However, we can guide them. He spoke directly to Brianna. Call that stone to you, dear.
I just want to get away from it, the girl shrieked.
I love you. Trust me. Brianna looked almost white with fear, but Justin took her hand and she fought for control. She looked at the gravestone.
Come,
she whispered. The stone moved toward her, much faster. Me? Pia asked Justin. If you would, we must have both orient on us. Pia leaned toward Etzel.
You heard him, Ed. Called it to you.
Etzel stared at her with dilated eyes. The thing will destroy me.
No, it won't,
she said firmly, though she had some private doubt.
Summon it.
I can't.
Yes, you can. I'll help you.
She kissed him on the mouth.
Do it, Ed.
She hated using her power over him this way, but she had to motivate him to do what he had to do. He stared at her, his emotions of fear and love warring on his face. She smiled at him. Then he turned slowly and gazed at the tree. Come, you horror, come, he whispered. The tree responded with alacrity. Suddenly it was bearing down on them. Hold on, everyone, Justin called. Para, now! The boat had evidently been waiting for this directive. He leaped forward so suddenly that Pia fell backward off her seat. And behind them, the rushing gravestone crashed into the charging tree. There was a ball of fire, followed by dissipating smoke. The two dream monsters were gone.
But there will be more, Brianna said, recovering, for all of us.
Monica, find that locket, Justin said urgently to the child.
That way,
Monica said, pointing to a nearby tiny island. The boat veered, but another shape appeared, and it wasn't the locket. Oh no, Justin breathed.
What is it, dear?
Brianna asked. It's a morph. Morph, Etzel said, as in morphine, a painkiller, or morphing, changing form. Both, Justin said with impending dread. But those are two different things, Pia protested. One's a shot, the other's a movie and ad gimmick. Both, Justin repeated weakly. It's an injection that causes folk to change shape involuntarily. I've seen it attack animals and ruin their lives. They get addicted to change, but can't handle the new forms. It's going to get me and make me change back into a tree, or worse, right when I want so much to remain as I am.
Now I feel your pain, Brianna said. I don't want you to change. Changing forms is fun, Monica said innocently.
But it's only an emotional thing, isn't it? Pia asked. Not really physical. An emotional tree could not embrace Brianna, Justin said, his eyes locked on the approaching hypodermic shape.
We have to get rid of it for sure, Brianna said.
But meanwhile Etzel had spotted something else. Book shape at 9 o'clock, he said. Pia looked and froze. That's the awful cookbook. What's scary about a cookbook? He asked. You never cook anyway.
That's why I never cook, she said tightly. It burns me.
An errant glance bounced around the boat.
A cookbook burns you?
Brianna asked after 1.5 moments.
It's another experience from childhood,
Pia explained, unable to look away from the horrible book as it nudged closer. My mother was cooking in our apartment on a hot plate, and she had a cookbook out. I saw the hot plate and asked what it was, but she thought I meant the book and said, "It's a cookbook." So I tried to pick it up. And you burned your hand, Etzel said.
Now I understand,
Brianna said.
That book out there is steaming hot. You could cook on it.
For sure, Pia agreed faintly. I'm terrified of cookbooks. I know it's stupid, but I can't touch one of those things.
And that morph better not touch Justin, Brianna said. It's our turn to maneuver, Etzel.
For sure, he agreed. Now the two of them focused on their partners, reversing the prior case.
Justin, call in that morph, Brianna said.
It's going to stick me.
Pia, call that cookbook, Etzel said. It'll burn me.
Call it, Brianna and Etzel said together. With extreme reluctance, knowing that the others were right, Pia pried open her mouth and said, "Come, you awful thing," and the hot book accelerated toward her. "Come, Needle," Justin whispered.
"Go, Para,"
Brianna cried. The boat shot forward. There was a crash behind it, and Pia's horror eased. 2 more awful fantasies had been destroyed. But another was already appearing. It looked like a vertical column, but it wasn't supporting anything. "What is that?" Etzel asked. Pia, recovering, looked. The thing did not fill her with horror, so she knew it wasn't hers. That was a kind of relief. "It looks like a rug," she said. "A rolled carpet."
"A carpet,"
Demonica cried, her voice a wail.
"That shouldn't be here."
"You mean it's yours?" Pia asked, surprised. She had thought the half-demon child to be immune.
"I gotta get out of here,"
Monica shrilled, and scrambled for the far side of the boat. "Wait," Pia exclaimed, catching her. "You can't run on water, and anyway, it'll follow you."
"Let me go! Let me go!"
the child screamed, struggling. But Pia drew her in close and held her firmly. "What's the problem?" Brianna asked, and it wasn't any routine query.
"Let me go!"
Monica shrieked. "The child needs calming," Justin said. Pia did not know the first thing about calming a child. She had never wanted anything to do with children who had in the past struck her as irrelevant nuisances. But she tried. "Take it easy," she said, hugging the little girl.
"No."
Monica was starting to change her form, oozing out of Pia's grip in slow, demonic fashion. Pia shifted her hold, but it was hard to hold on to a shifting, squirming, squiggling form. She was losing the contest. "We must discover the nature of the threat," Justin said insistently. Pia saw the rolled carpet looming closer. It was angling now, as if making ready to unroll on the water. "Monica," she said, taking another hold, "what's about that carpet?" But the child was beyond listening. She wanted only to get away and try to flee, though she'd drown in the attempt. "Kiss her," Brianna suggested. Pia hauled Monica in and kissed her on the forehead, trying to emulate motherly fashion. The child burst into tears and clutched her.
"Don't let it get me."
"I won't," Pia promised, though she had no idea how to keep that promise. "But you must tell me. What's its secret?"
"It's going to roll me up,"
Monica cried wetly.
"I'll smother."
Now it was coming clear. Suffocation inside the rolled carpet. Someone must have threatened the child with that once, and it had become a buried fear. Maybe the carpet was illusory, but its terror could still stop the child's breathing. It was tilting farther, showing its hollow interior. "Is there another spook in sight?" Pia inquired desperately. "No," Etzel said. Pia hugged the child closer. "Then find another way to abolish it." Etzel turned to Justin. "Is there any other way?" "Sometimes, if there is a pun that can be changed. But there seems to be nothing funny about being smothered by a rolled carpet." "Yes, there is," Etzel said. "Carpet tunnel syndrome."
"You got it,"
Brianna said. "But how can it be changed?" Pia was discovering, to her surprise, that she rather liked comforting the child. She had never tried it before, but holding the little girl seemed meaningful. Monica was taking comfort, though as yet they had no certainty of saving her. The carpet was unrolling, making ready for its prey. "There has to be some other variant," Etzel said. "Carpet, carpal." A bulb flashed over Pia's head. "Carpool tunnel thin dome," she exclaimed. The carpet apparition seemed to groan. It changed form, becoming a thin glassy dome with a tunnel through it, wide enough for several cars. No way to smother anyone in that. Disgusted, it faded.
You saved me,
Demonica said, giving Pia a heartfelt extra hug, and then a wet kiss.
Well, I had to, dear,
Pia said, feeling a tear at her eye.
I love you.
And I love you, Pia said. Now she was sure. She wanted a child of her own. She had never realized before how precious they could be. You never punned before, Etzel said, amazed. I guess I never had to. She let the child go. That job was done, but she would never forget that joy of holding the little girl close.
There's the magic locket,
Monica said, as brightly as if she had never been scared. Children did recover from things rapidly.
On soft.
Pia looked. She saw the locket hanging by its chain from the neck of a chunky standing man. The man was facing the other way, but the locket was against his broad, bare back. I can get it, Etzel said. No, this is my mission, Pia said. I'll get it. She appreciated his offer, but suspected that she could more readily charm the man to give it to her. Para reached the aisle and waddled onto land. Pia stepped out and approached the man. She noticed that his back was flat and covered with small print. Excuse me, she said. He turned. For a moment she was afraid he was completely naked, but his front side was garishly clothed. Yes? I'm Tia. I need that magic locket. Welcome to it. I am Softcover. I was holding it for Demonica. Softcover? She asked. My soft paper back is hard to cover. Now she made the connection. Paperback. Hardcover. He was, in fact, a standing, talking book. Not a cookbook, fortunately. Cheap adventure fiction. She smiled fetchingly at him. Thank you so much, Mr. Softcover. Will you give it to me? I am unable to reach it. You must take it from me. So did he want to make her embrace him? Well, if that was the price of it, she could do it. She stepped in close, reached her arms around his arms and chest, caught hold of the chain, and lifted it up and over his head. It was a stretch, and at one point she was pressing fairly firmly against him, but he didn't move. She brought it down and had possession. Thank you, she said, smiling again. You are welcome. Now she saw that his arms were actually the soft covers of the book, with the hands painted on. He could not move them other than to open and close them, so he had not been deceiving her. She turned and stepped back into the boat. Now let's get the bleep out of here, she said briskly. The boat splashed into the water and moved rapidly back the way they had come. But another shape was coming toward them. It looked like a winged woman. Whose fantasy was this one?
Willow,
Monica called happily.
Willow,
Brianna echoed.
What are you doing here?
The winged girl came to land in the boat.
Hello, Monica, Justin, Brianna. I think I have business with your friends.
Oh, okay. Brianna turned to Etzel and Pia.
This is Willow Elf, Sean Mundane's wife.
She turned back to the girl.
And these are Etzel and Pia from Mundania. Yes, the good magician told me to find them here. I need the magic locket.
Now wait a minute, Pia protested. We need this locket to stop the demon CO2. The good magician knows that.
Yes, of course,
Willow agreed.
But as soon as you finish with it, I must take it to Mundania to help Nimby. Nimby's in trouble?
Brianna asked, alarmed.
We fear so. He has very little magic there, because he is using a mundane body rather than his own, and we think the demon Earth is trying to trap him there. Messages came to several folk, saying Nimby eats dust. The good magician takes them most seriously, so we must get magic to him soon.
This is serious, Justin said.
Yes, I need to fill the locket with magic dust, so that it will carry the magic to him. Then he will be able to reconnect with you and return to the land of Xanth.
While we return to Mundania, Pia said, surprised to hear a tinge of regret in her voice. Despite all its complications, she was coming to like it here. For one thing, there was her 16-year-old body. It had been wonderful having it, and using it to impress men. We'll give you the locket as soon as we finish with CO2. Willow frowned. It would be better if I borrowed it now, to fill it with magic dust.
You can't fill it, Monica said. It's bottomless.
Willow nodded agreement.
I mean, to put enough dust in it to help Nimby.
But we need it now, Pia said, distrusting this.
I will bring it back to you. I simply need to take it to the Magic Dust Village.
How long will that take?
No more than half a day, the elf said. Most of that will be flying time.
Pia was pained. Isn't there a faster way? Willow considered.
Actually, there is, now that I remember it. Pearl lives near here.
Pearl?
Her talent is summoning magic dust. With her help, I could do it in an hour.
Go to Pearl, Pia agreed, handing over the magic locket.
Thank you. Where can I most readily find you, then?
At the Snow Mountains.
I will be there.
Willow spread her lovely wings and took off.
This is bad news, Brianna said. If Nimby gets trapped in Mundania, all of Xanth will be in trouble.
We shall deal with CO2, and then the locket will go to rescue Nimby, Etzel said. Then his glance strayed. My! Pia looked. She saw a troop of shapely nymphs dancing across the surface of the water. Whose horror is that? Mine, Etzel said. Only it's no horror. I've always dreamed of going to a show like that. Pia eyed the figures disapprovingly. They had very well-fleshed legs and very short skirts. There were 5 of them, with hair matching skirts. Blue, red, green, yellow, and black. This is going to freak you out?
For sure, Brianna said. When they get close and do a high kick, so as to show they're pretty colored.
I get it. So is there another horror to collide with them? I fear so, Justin said. Over there. Pia looked the way he indicated. Her blood tried to curdle. It was a formless hump that sent a dreadful chill through her.
What is it?
Brianna asked. It's my personal monster, Pia said. The thing I want least to encounter. What is that? Justin asked. I don't know. Just that I've got to get away from it.
How can you be afraid of something you don't know?
Monica asked. I think I'm afraid of it because it's unknown, Pia said. It's something I simply can't face.
Well, we'll crash it into the dancing nymphs, Brianna said. But you'll both have to summon them, so they'll collide where we were.
Glad to, Etzel said. Come, nymphs. Pia opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. She just couldn't summon that unknown horror.
Hey, we have to get them aligned, Brianna said. Bring the hump. Only you can do it.
I can't, Pia moaned. I just can't.
Then we have a problem, Brianna said. The nymphs are upon us. Para, dodge.
The boat dodged to the side, but couldn't escape the nymphs. They intercepted it and spilled onto the seats, going for Etzel. One of them tumbled head under skirt into Pia, giving her a phenomenal flash of green panties. Of course that didn't freak her out, because she was female, and because her main attention was taken by the more distant lump pursuing her. But she knew Etzel was another matter. The nymph rolled on into Pia, and through her. It was an illusion, but those bright, full panties would take men out regardless.
Justin, Brianna said urgently, maybe you'd better, before one of them flashes you.
I didn't want to use this, but I see I must, Justin said with regret. He drew from a pocket something that to Pia's peripheral vision looked like a big letter D. He flipped it at the cluster of nymphs. There was an explosion. Pieces of nymph and skirt and panty flew out in every direction, dissipating. but Pia didn't feel anything physical. "Hey, what happened?" Edsel asked, blinking.
"Justin destroyed them with his deed tonight," Brianna said. "It blows things up." He said it for illusions, so it blew up only the illusion.
"But I was just about to see them do the high kick," Edsel complained.
"And it would have freaked you out fivefold," Brianna retorted. "A one-panty freak-out is over as soon as eye contact is broken. But when there are several, the effect is geometrical. You'd have been out for days, and we can't afford that."
"Oh," Edsel looked both disappointed and sheepish. "But Pia's spook is still coming," Justin said, "and we can't stop it."
"We'll just have to run for it," Brianna said. "Maybe it can't go beyond the edge of the fantasy. Go, Para!"
The boat lurched forward. They reached the bank, and the boat heaved out of the water and across the land. Were they safe? Pia faced back, watching, because she had no choice. For a while they gained on the horror, but then it floated off the water and over the land. It was still coming.
"Well, we'll figure out something,"
Brianna said uncertainly.
"Keep going, Para, to the Snow Mountains."
The boat ran along at an excellent clip. Slowly the pursuing apparition lost ground and finally disappeared behind a turn in the forest. Pia's gaze was freed, but she knew the thing had not given up. It would pursue her until it caught her.
"The locket!" Brianna exclaimed. "You can put it in the locket."
"An illusion?" Edsel asked.
"For sure. That locket takes in anything you ask it to, and won't let it out until you say so."
"But Willow has the locket," Pia reminded her.
"Oh, bleep. I forgot. Well, we'll just have to stay out of its way until we get the locket back."
Para made excellent time, and before long they were rising through the foothills of the mountains. Pia could tell, because the hills were shaped like giant feet. But this also slowed the forward progress of the boat. The pursuing hump was floating, and had no problem with climbing. It came back into sight, slowly closing in.
"It's going to catch us," Brianna said, "before we get there, and before Willow brings back the locket."
"What can I do?" Pia wailed. "There is only one way to deal with inescapable terror," Justin said. "That is to face it and conquer it." "But I can't face it." "Then it will destroy you," he said regretfully. "But it's not physical," Edsel said. "It's just emotion." "Emotion suffices," Justin said. "It can wipe out the mind. It is called insanity." "So if she flees it and it catches her, she's doomed," Edsel said. "But if she faces it down, maybe she'll make it." "That is the situation."
"Maybe not," Brianna said. "Has anyone ever tried to intercept one of those things? I mean, someone it's not aimed at?"
"I don't believe so, but—" Brianna jumped out of the boat, caught her balance, and stood in the path of the spook.
"Come on, spook," she cried. "You've got to get through me first."
The thing loomed up and passed right through the girl. Brianna couldn't touch it. Pia knew what she had to do. "If I can't escape it, I might as well face it," she said. She got out of the boat and stood beside a small pond. This was not courage, but desperation. She was quaking. The hump sailed toward her, followed by Brianna. But the girl stopped when she saw Pia. This was something that only Pia could tackle. Pia hoped she looked brave from a distance. It certainly wasn't the case close up. Her heart was pounding, her hands were shaking, and she knew her eyes were dilated. The only thing that stopped her from turning to run away was her certainty that it would catch her and be even worse than if she faced it. The thing loomed close. It slowed, orienting on her. It began to assume the form of a person, or rather, a horrible parody of a person. "Who are you?" she demanded timorously. The shape continued to clarify. It became female, with a shapely body, a heart-shaped face, green eyes, and long dark brown hair. It looked weirdly familiar, in fact. She looked at its reflection in the pond. Beside it was her own reflection. The two figures were the same. She was terrified of herself? She was indeed terrified, and it was her image. But behind the fever of her fear, a certain animal cunning lurked. Were things really as they seemed? Or was this apparition fooling her in a way she did not understand? She peered at the thing and saw that its face was colored. Did that mean something? It was black. What did that mean? Red might be rage, green might be jealousy, blue might be sick, yellow might be fear. But what was black? She was sure it had nothing to do with race. Brianna of the Black Wave had abolished any such concern. It had to be an emotion. She felt it almost overwhelming her. But which one? "What are you?" she asked. The figure moved closer. Its face began to show the highlights of a skull. But it wasn't death, just a comparison to death. Something she'd rather die than do. Or, rather, admit. "What awful secret do you hide?" she asked desperately. The figure reached for her. She knew it would blast her mind if she didn't counter it. But how could she do that if she didn't know what it was? Desperately she reviewed her concerns, frustrations, and fears. She couldn't think what it was. But there was something much worse than a cookbook. So bad that she couldn't recognize it even when it stared her in the face. What was this black emotion? Then she did something extremely nervy for her. She reached out and touched the thing's hand. Suddenly the emotion clarified. It was guilt. She was so horribly guilt-ridden for something that she couldn't even face it. But now she had to, lest she be destroyed by it. What was her guilt? Then, slowly and painfully, it came to her. Her guilt was about Edsel and his friend Doug. For she had been Doug's girlfriend and tired of him, supposing Edsel to be more entertaining. So she had flashed a bit of this at Edsel. The figure's blouse faded to show breast and cleavage. And a bit of that. It showed high thigh. And in a moment she had captured his fancy. Then all that remained was to engineer an exchange. It had been almost too easy. So Doug was without girlfriend, and Edsel was with her, and Pia was satisfied. But it had been dirty. Doug was a fine man, eminently undeserving of such treatment. Oh, he had found another girlfriend in Kim, and was happy now. But that did not ameliorate Pia's guilt for the way she had treated him. She should have been upfront, told him how she felt, assured him that it was no fault in him, and wished him well. Instead, she had covertly dumped him. And now, long after she thought she had buried it forever, that guilt had returned to haunt her, to overcome her. The girls of Xanth thought that there was shame in accidentally showing their panties. They didn't know what real shame was. The irony was that there was nothing she could do about it. Doug was better off with Kim than he had been with Pia, and Pia was worse off with Edsel than she had been with Doug. She had been doing neither Doug nor Edsel any favor. She wasn't worth their company. She would be doing them both a favor by getting the bleep out of the picture. "You win," she said to the awful figure. Then she turned and leaped into the pond. In half a moment, she realized that even in this she had messed up. First, she couldn't drown herself, because she was too good a swimmer, and the pond was too small. Second, the water was only knee-deep. She had gotten soaked for nothing. Per was there, floating to her rescue, but Pia waved him away. "I guess I really can't escape," she said. "I have to deal with it." The odd thing was that she was feeling better now, despite her bedraggled condition. She felt better than ever, physically, and more confident emotionally. She saw the others in the boat. Brianna dipped her hand in the water and opened her mouth, but Justin cautioned her, and she was silent. They were leaving Pia alone to settle this herself, in whatever way she could. She stood and strode out of the pool toward the figure. "I know what I have to do," she said. "I have to stop burying, stop running, and handle my guilt. I have to learn from bad experience. I can't change the past, but I can change the present and the future. I can stop being so stupidly shallow and start being a better woman. I can make sure that I never wrong a good man again." She turned to look at Etzel. "And I can bleeping well do everything I can to make our marriage work." She turned back to face the spook. "I can do all the things I wouldn't do before. I can learn to cook. I can do the laundry. I can—" She paused with dawning surmise. "I can have children and be a mother. I can do the whole family bit, so that I have nothing to feel guilty about anymore." Then she walked right into the figure. "So do your worst, spook. I'm ashamed of how I was, but I don't have to be that anymore." But the figure was gone. It had dissipated as she touched it. She had vanished for spook. Para came up to her, carrying the others.
"That pool," Brianna said. "Do you know what it is?"
"Not deep enough," Pia said. "I'm a mess."
"It's a healing spring," Brianna said. "We didn't realize before."
"A healing spring?" Pia asked blankly.
"Whatever injuries or whatever you have, it makes them better."
"The only problem I have are physical and emotional," Pia said. "My diabetes and my attitude, and I'm fixing the second."
"I think it fixed the first," Brianna said. "How are you feeling now, physically?"
"Great, never better. But diabetes isn't something a mere splash in a pool can fix."
"Why not?"
Pia considered. "Well, I don't know. But if I discover that I can get along without insulin shots, then I'll know." She turned to Etzel. "Meanwhile, I'll do what I can. Ed, the marriage is on." "On?" he asked, looking as if he expected this to be a joke. "And we'll do it your way, with children and home cooking." I don't understand." He had been too far away to overhear her dialogue with the guilt spook. She climbed into the boat and hugged him. "You will. For right now you'll have to settle for me wet." "Any way you want," he agreed enthusiastically. "Here's a towel." He started drying her off, somewhat ineffectively.
"Wrap her in a blanket," Brianna suggested. "Meanwhile, we had better get on into the mountains."
"For sure," Brianna said. She looked around.
"Monica, time to get back in the boat."
The child came running back from the bushes.
"Look what I found."
"First in, then tell," Brianna said. The boat resumed his trek, while Etzel swathed Pia in a voluminous blanket so she could get out of her clothing and get thoroughly dry. She knew this wasn't the occasion to go naked again.
"So what did you find?"
Brianna asked Monica.
"A slug."
"Yuck!" The child laughed.
"No, not a real slug. A fake slug that pretends to be a coin or something. See, it takes any shape I want."
She held up a tiny dark disc. In her hand it shaped itself into a thimble, then a star. "Hey, that's clever," Etzel said. "Can I make it work too?"
"Sure."
The child delighted in teaching the man how to do it. Etzel had always been good with children. It was Pia who hadn't wanted any. Until now. If, by any chance, they had succeeded in getting the stork's attention, she would keep what it brought her. Of course, this was Xanth, and they were in borrowed bodies, so it didn't count. But the principle was there. In Xanth or Mundania, she knew Etzel would be happy to cooperate. It was getting on time for her shot, but she didn't feel the need. She pricked her finger and did the blood test, and it showed she was perfect. Could she really be rid of her ailment? That seemed too good to be true. Yet she continued to feel great, physically, and good mentally, too. It was as if the healing spring had healed her emotions as well as her body, as if it had made her whole. They came into the region of snow. It was smaller and higher than it had been. More snow had melted. That meant that more water was flowing down to flood the valley. The demon CO2 needed to be stopped immediately, which was, of course, why they had gone for the magic locket. "The locket!" Pia exclaimed. "Where's Willow?" "She must have been delayed," Brianna said. "She wouldn't stand us up deliberately." "But what if CO2 comes?" "Don't speak his name," Brianna said. Too late. A dark, swirling cloud formed. "Did I hear my name?" the voice of the demon came. "We're in for it now," Brianna said darkly. "You got that right, Blackwave darling," the demon said, as his tawny body took muscular shape. "Didn't I tell you to stay away from here?" "I'll distract him," Etzel said, jumping out of the boat. "You get out of range." Para turned, ready to flee. "Not so fast, Quackfoot," CO2 said, reaching out to hook a huge finger into the back so as to hold the boat in place. "I think you would make excellent kindling." "I'll distract him," Pia said, scrambling out, her blanket still around her, to stall for time. The demon gazed down at her. "What have we here? A shrouded nymph?" "A shrouded woman," Pia said bravely. She opened the front of her blanket. "Well, well! Aren't you the shapely one? What are you up to, sensual creature?" He lifted his finger from the boat, and it scooted away. But then he aimed a blast of air at it, and the boat and remaining occupants tumbled headlong into the river. But Pia couldn't help them. She had to distract the demon long enough to give Willow time to bring the magic locket. How could she do that? She knew only one way. I'll dance for you," she said. "Indeed you shall," CO2 agreed. He reached out, caught the edge of her blanket between thumb and forefinger, and jerked. The blanket whipped away and set Pia madly spinning. She caught her balance. Now she was naked, for there had not been time for her clothing to dry. The blanket was her clothing. She didn't even have her panties on, so couldn't freak out the demon, assuming that demons could be so freaked. But she had to carry through. She started to dance, making her hips shift and her flesh jiggle. She had the best shape of her life, and it seemed the best health of her life, thanks to her 16-year-old body and the loss of her diabetes. She could impress any man. But the demon was not exactly a man. Could she distract him long enough? She whirled and bounced and lifted a leg fetchingly, giving it her all. Where was Willow? "You're pretty good," CO2 said. "In fact, I think I'll keep you." "Keep me?" She didn't like the sound of that. "You came back when I sent you away. You are trying to stall me so your friends can escape. But you do have an interesting shape. So I will subject you to a fate worse than death." She had been too successful in diverting him. Now he wanted her for storkish purposes. Pia tried to run, but the demon's arm stretched out impossibly long, and his hand became huge. It caught her around the torso, not hard, but very firm. It lifted her into the air, so that her bare legs dangled. As with the guilt monster, she could not escape. She had to tackle it directly. But she knew that vowing to be a better person would not have much effect this time. So she pretended confusion. "Worse than, are you a masochist?" "No way." "Excellent. Because I am a sadist. I am going to bind you in chains and whip you and force you unwillingly to serve my pleasure at your great discomfort dozens of times a day until I tire of you. Then I'll break you and throw you away." If he had intended to frighten her, he had succeeded. Pia screamed. She couldn't help it, though she knew that was what the demon wanted. CO2 smiled. There was nothing nice about it. "Yes, scream, my fair little toy. Scream in anticipation, because the reality will be much worse. The arm contracted, bringing her closer. As she tried dizzily to free herself, her eye caught a glimpse of something in the sky. It looked like a bird, a plane. No, a winged elf. Willow was arriving. All she had to do was stall a little more. Pia forced a sexy smile. No, I'm sure the reality will be much better. You're quite a figure of a creature. Don't try to fool me, precious. I will make you scream in physical and emotional pain. The huge fingers contracted cruelly, showing that this was no bluff. She was already hurting. But don't you want me smiling? She gasped. Obliging your every foolish whim? Obliging, yes. Smiling, no. I like my toys to suffer. Not so fast, hot stuff. It was Edsel. CO2 looked. So did Pia. Edsel was advancing on the demon, holding the magic locket before him. She remembered that the locket had to be close to the object before it could be invoked. Could Edsel get close enough? The demon dropped Pia like a squeezed sponge and focused on the man. What do you propose to do about it? CO2 demanded. I am going to put you inside this magic locket, Edsel said evenly, just as soon as I get you into its range. Ed, don't tell him that, Pia cried from the ground. But she was being foolish, because he already had told, giving away the element of surprise. Fascinating, the demon said. That really is the magic locket. I thought it was lost centuries ago along with other hinge artifacts. Where did you find it? Demon Ted and Demonica found it, Edsel said, carefully aiming the front of the locket at CO2. We recovered it from the fantasy. It's the one thing that will stop you, because when invoked, it puts whatever it is aimed at within, and even a demon can't escape. Once you are safely inside, you will stay there, and only a little of your substance will remain outside. Not enough to warm Xanth much. The mountains will cool, and the glaciers will grow again, and the valley below will no longer flood, and the trees will prosper. What are you, an environmentalist nut or something like that? CO2 asked derisively. Something like that, Edsel agreed. He was close to the demon now. Don't dally, Ed, Pia cried. Just do it. Needless delay was sheer folly when dealing with a brute like CO2. It won't work, CO2 said. Oh, why not? Edsel held the locket up and opened his mouth, about to invoke it. The demon's hand swept through the air so fast it left a glowing blur streak. It snatched the locket from Edsel's hand. Because now I have the magic locket, CO2 said triumphantly. Pia screamed. She hated seeming like a helpless damsel, but that was what she had become. No, Edsel said, looking horrified. What are you going to do? What do you think, foolish mortal? The same thing you were going to do to me. I'll conjure you into the locket. Then I'll make your girlfriend scream and scream as I ravish her. When she has suffered so much that she can't scream anymore, I will break her in half and put her into the locket for you to enjoy. What do you think of that? I can't stand it, Edsel cried, turning to run away. CO2 leaped forward, bearing the locket. He aimed it at Edsel at close range. In, he said, as Pia screamed again in sheer despair. There was an implosion as the locket took in substance. A cloud of smoke puffed around, obscuring the scene. Pia burst into tears. Not for herself, but for her lost husband. Oh, Ed, you were so brave, and I'm so undeserving. I'll never forget you or stop loving you. The smoke dissipated. There stood Edsel. That's great, he said. Ed, you're free. She wasn't sure she could believe it. She ran to hug him. What happened? How did you... Well, I outsmarted him. But as he spoke, a horrible suspicion suffused her. Could this be the demon, emulating Edsel, to torment her further? She had to know. Ed, who was I with before I was with you? He looked at her, surprised. What has that got to do with the price of beans in Mundania? Just answer, please. Doug, of course. But the demon might have eavesdropped on prior conversations and picked that up. How did you get me? We made a bet, My motorcycle against his girlfriend. I won, so...
It really is you.
She hugged him again and kissed him ardently. She couldn't remember ever before being so relieved. Willow Elf flew down.
I hate to interrupt, but I need the locket.
For sure, Edsel said, but I'd better adjust it first. He bent and lifted the locket from where it had fallen and used his fingernail to pry off the front panel.
What are you doing?
Pia asked, amazed. Well, I figured I couldn't get close enough to CO2 to conjure him in, so I faked him out. I used Monica's slug to put this fake front on the back, so it was actually facing the opposite way it seemed to. Then...
So he conjured himself inside, Pia said, instead of you. That was brilliant, Ed. When he grabbed it, I thought...
That was the idea. You really helped, Pia, because you believed. He handed the locket to Willow. Now it's right. Remember to point it the right way when you invoke it.
For sure,
Willow agreed, smiling. Then she spread her wings and descended. Para Boat waddled up, carrying Justin and Brianna.
We need to get back to Compassion's cave and let Para go,
the Black Wave girl said.
He's done more than enough for us.
Ed looked at Pia. You know, I just love holding a bare damsel like this. But maybe you'd be warmer in the blanket.
For sure,
she agreed, kissing him again.
Oh, Ed, I love you. I really do now.
Ugh, Demonica said.
Are you two going to get mushy?
For sure, they said together, laughing. 12. Weather. The storm seemed to have cleared the air. They packed their gear and rolled up their sleeping bags and started back along the trail. Their camping excursion would have to be cut short. They needed to get to a computer terminal and to the ozone before dearth struck again.
Let me make sure I have this straight, Kim said. All you need is to connect with Ed and Pia via the modem mode and switch back, and then it will all be over?
Yes, Chlorine said. Once Nimby is back in his own body, in Xanth, Dearth can't touch him.
But couldn't Dearth do something awful to Ed for vengeance? Like stepping on a nuisance ant?
Dearth wouldn't bother. Nimby is all that matters. Once he escapes, the game is done, and Dearth will pay no further attention.
Are you sure?
That's not the way a human person would react. Demons aren't human. It took Nimby time and concentration to learn any human things, like dreaming. It doesn't come naturally. He wouldn't have done that if he hadn't gotten so closely involved with human folk, because of his wager. No other demon has done that. They remain indifferent to antly affairs. It's just not in a demon to care what happens to Ed or Pia, one way or the other, when their bodies are no longer host to our spirits. They will be perfectly safe.
That's a relief, Kim said.
But while Nimby and I remain here, Edsel and Pia's bodies are definitely at risk, Chlorine continued grimly. Nimby would lose considerable status if his host body were killed while he was in it.
Killed?
As you said, stepping on an ant. Actually, the body wouldn't die as long as Nimby remained confined in it, but...
But can that happen?
Kim asked with a shudder.
I mean, if it's only weather that Dearth controls?
Weather can become ugly.
The weather is beautiful right now.
But consider last night, Doug said. The way that storm came up and washed out the one peg to collapse our tent and waterlog our computer. That impresses me. It should, Chlorine said. Demons have enormous power when they choose to exercise it. So we need to reach the ozone and revert identities as soon as possible. Before Dearth realizes, Doug agreed. Like an ant avoiding a trap, unnoticed. Yes. But Chlorine, alerted by Nimby, doubted that it would be that easy. They hiked to the base camp, where their car and motorcycle waited. They loaded the gear. Then Doug and Kim got into the car, and Nimby and Chlorine got on the motorcycle. The cycle's motor started right up, but the car didn't follow. They looped back to check.
Dead, Kim called. Storm must have shorted out the battery.
The folk of a neighborhood car approached. "Need a jump?" the man asked. "'Fraid so," Doug said. "Thanks." The man had jumper cables. Kim explained the process to Chlorine as the men did it. The cables connect the good battery to the dead one and provide current to start the motor. Then it recharges its own battery as it runs. But it didn't work. Doug's car remained dead. "I think you have a worse problem," the man said. "Better call Triple B." "I guess we'll have to," Doug agreed. "But thanks for the jump." To the others, he said, "They'll come fairly promptly, but we'll still have to get the car towed and fixed, and that could take longer." They consulted. "Maybe you two should get on back to town," Kim said. "We're going to be delayed several hours by the look of it. You can go to a library and use their connection and switch back before we get out of here." Chlorine looked at Nimby. He shook his head no. Then he touched her hand. "Oh, Nimby thinks Dearth is trying to separate us. We will be relatively vulnerable without our knowledgeable companions. It is better to remain together." Doug and Kim exchanged a look. "That could be," Doug said, "and we don't want to put you into any unnecessary risk." "We must advise you that there is risk to you as long as you remain with us," Chlorine said. "But maybe less than there is for you if you are alone," Kim said. "So we'd better stick together." Doug considered. "I wonder. I think there is risk in delay and risk in separating. Maybe we should call a taxi just to get this done in a hurry." "But maybe Dearth has anticipated that," Kim said, "in which case we would be playing into his hands." "I wonder, can Nimby sense the larger situation, so as to know what course is best?" Chlorine checked. "He can't fathom the intention of Dearth, but can focus on the likely route that help will come to us from Xanth, if we can't reach the ozone on our own." "Maybe try that while we wait," Doug said. "I think this is a bit like a chess game. We need to see more of the board before making our next move." Nimby agreed. So Doug went to call Triple B, while Nimby sat in the dead car and focused his ambient awareness on No Name Key, where a person from Xanth would most likely pass through to Mundania with magic dust. If any of the modem mode folk got through to the real folk in Xanth. And the news was good. "Willow Elf has passed through," Chlorine said, "carrying a locket of magic dust. She has joined the Baldwin family. They are setting out to bring it here." "But how will they find us?" Kim asked. "They have the address of Ed and Pia's home," Chlorine said. "They will go there." "So that's where we should be going as soon as we can." Chlorine looked at Nimby. "Yes." But she wasn't speaking the truth, because Nimby indicated no. Because Dearth was now listening and would block whatever they tried to do. The BBB help arrived. The car had to be towed. It refused to respond to the mechanic. There was an interesting process whereby the truck connected to the car and hauled it along by its nose. They waited while the repairs were made at the garage. There was a place to eat nearby, called the diner, so they went there. "This has delayed things several hours," Doug said. "But with the car going again, what's to stop us from just driving home?" "And waiting for the Baldwins to arrive," Kim added. Nimby merely smiled. "Then what about going to a local library and lumbering on, going to the ozone and exchanging back from there?" Doug said. Chlorine knew the answer to that. "The others have to be there to make the exchange. If we go there and Etzel and Pia aren't there, it will be for nothing, and Dearth will make sure we can't go there again later. We have to go at an appointed check-in time." "But we've been checking in different times," Kim said. "So have they, evidently. So—" "Brianna had an ear," Chlorine said. "That's what you would call a field unit, for spot communication only. They could have been anywhere in Xanth. But now they must report physically to Compassion's cave to enter the ambience of the ozone. Xanth is more limited in this respect than in Mundania. We trust they are on their way and will remain there until we connect." "So it's better late than early," Kim said, comprehending. "Because chances are there will be only one chance. After that, Dearth will catch on and interfere.
Exactly.
Doug nodded. So between times, we might as well travel so as to get more convenient access.
And get the magic,
Kim said. As they left the diner, it was as if night were falling, though it was only mid-afternoon. Clouds loomed high and broad, moving to cut off what remained of the sky. A considerable storm was forming. And we couldn't get moving to escape it before it formed, because of the time it takes to fix a washed-out car, Doug said, understanding. Dearth knows what he's doing.
I've never seen such a dangerous-looking storm cloud,
Kim said, awed. NIMBY touched Chlorine's arm. NIMBY wants you to know that if you leave now, while we remain here, the storm will not follow you. You can escape what is apt to be exceedingly ugly weather. Doug and Kim spoke together.
No.
Spoken like true companions, Chlorine said. But you will pay a price. Let's get moving now, Doug said. But maybe you'd better park the lemon and ride in the car with us. It'll be safer. NIMBY shook his head. We'll ride it back, Chlorine said. You told us how Etzel values it. We must return it to him in good condition. Doug looked again at the brooding cloud. You do have a point, but this could be dangerous. We could have it garaged here to keep it safe. Cars are safer in storms. But NIMBY would not yield. Chlorine knew that he had his own reasons, perhaps beyond her understanding, but surely valid. The Neptune was ready. It's amazing how much damage a single storm can do sometimes, the mechanic said. Well, it's not a new car, Doug said. This was independent of age. This car has been well cared for, but somehow the wiring. I've never seen this particular failure before. It's a fluke. Just so long as it won't happen again. Guaranteed. It's better than new now. Doug and Kim did what they had to do to settle the cost of the repair. They had something called insurance that made it easier. Then they drove the car out of the repair shop. NIMBY and Chlorine climbed on the motorcycle and joined them. Maybe Piers should ride in the car, Kim called. It's going to be wet on the lemon. No, I'll stay with Ed, Chlorine called back. The storm looked worse than ever. It frightened Chlorine, but she clung to NIMBY. She was not going to let him face it alone. The Neptune turned south and followed the highway out of town. Most of the traffic was streaming the other way, into town, as mundanes caught on that the weather was truly threatening. They were doing the sensible thing and heading for cover. A gust of wind caught them. The cycle veered, then corrected course. NIMBY had progressed from beginner to full competence at a rapid rate, and now could handle it very well. But she wondered why he had chosen to ride the lemon when he could have ridden in the safer car. Was it to spare the companion some risk? She suspected not. There must be some way in which the motorcycle enhanced his own chances. Lightning cracked close by, and thunder boomed out from it. Chlorine remembered cumulofractonimbus, one of the worst of clouds, and the show he could put on. But this was in drear mundania, and that made it more frightening. Rain came down, first a few big drops, then a pelting of medium drops, then an almost solid sheet of small ones. In 1.5 moments they were soaked. The road looked slick and slippery, but NIMBY pressed on, following the car. Chlorine shivered and hated what it was doing to her hair, but what had she expected? Lightning struck a tree ahead of the car, and a large branch crashed onto the road, blocking it. The Neptune's wheels skidded as it braked, and it almost didn't stop in time. The lemon stopped beside it. Chlorine was in contact with NIMBY, so knew what he wanted her to know. Clear the branch. We'll distract the storm. But we must stay with you, Kim called back. We'll return soon. And they were off, riding back along the road. NIMBY lifted one hand, reaching behind his shoulder. Chlorine realized he wanted to talk more specifically. She touched his hand with hers. His thought came through, but she couldn't believe it at first. You want me to drive this thing? But I don't know how. His further thought came, instructing her in the rudiments. He was serious. He needed time to think, to spread his awareness, to find something he needed. But he couldn't pause, because the moment he did, the storm would catch him with a bolt of lightning. It wouldn't kill him, but could kill her and knock out his body, costing them valuable time. If his body was unconscious, away from the companions, it might be days before they got together again, and Dearth would win. The notion appalled her, but she would have to try to do it. To give Nimby the time he needed to be aware. It was almost the only magic he retained, and he had to have the chance to use it. But to control the motorcycle, she would have to get in front. How could they change places without stopping? She drew her feet up, setting them on the saddle beside Nimby. Then she clung to his shoulders and lifted her bottom, standing behind him, bent over his head, hanging on as the wet wind tore at her body. Then she hauled one foot up and over his shoulder, and the other. Now she was standing in front of him, reaching under herself to clutch at his shoulders, her panties in his face. If he had been a normal man in Xanth, he would have freaked out and they would have sailed into a tree. She slid down his front to land in his lap. Then he slid back and she took over the handlebars and pedals. He put his hands on her hips and did not move again. He was tuning out. She was controlling the machine. All she had to do was keep it going without spinning out of control and crashing, until Nimby was through sensing. She didn't have to race, but in the driving rain the handling was treacherous. She tried to keep going straight, but veered to the left. She leaned and steered right, and veered too sharply right. The wheels went into the puddle that lined the side, sending up a spray and dragging. She felt the machine slow, but she managed to get it back into the center and straightened out. Then something in the road loomed, maybe a piece of branch or an animal. She swerved around it and veered too far left, into the puddle there. Again the water went up in a sheet and the cycle slowed. She had to watch her reactions, but she was getting better control. Her confidence was increasing. This wasn't so bad. Lightning struck right ahead. The flash blinded her, and the crack of it deafened her. She could neither see nor hear, but they were still hurtling forward. She didn't have time to panic. She knew where the road was, and if she kept their balance, it would be all right until she recovered her senses. If she could just go straight. Was she going straight? She felt the motorcycle slowing. That meant she had drifted to the side. But which side? She had to turn back into the road, but if she turned the wrong way, they would go off the road and crash. She didn't dare go wrong. But which was right? She used her ears, which were starting to recover. The splashing seemed worse on the left, and the motorcycle seemed to be trying to drag that way. So she fought it, going straight, because she wasn't quite sure. Better to forge on through water than to turn the wrong way. End of Side 8. 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 Turn the wrong way. End of Side 8.